Welcome everyone. I didn't expect the full room. Very honored. Thank you. Welcome to the greatest analytics of all time. I know I'm putting pressure on myself, putting this greatest analytics title there, but this session is really about learning the fundamentals of time-based analysis in Tableau. My name is Johanna Knapp. I work as a product consultant based in Frankfurt. And like in my day-to-day work, I help customers evaluating Tableau. And I see that at least 4 out of 5 use cases that customers choose or prospects choose to evaluate Tableau are based on measuring business performance. And for that, time-based analysis is one of the most relevant topics to know about. What you can see there in the back is one of my personal KPIs when I was still at school. So this simple but yet effective time-based analysis shows the downgrade of my passion and understanding for maths. So on a scale from 1 to 6, this is really, really bad. You can imagine my parents were not really proud. But don't worry. This person can actually deliver this session to you because I got my act together. And I want this session for you to be like this starting point at the bottom, after which you will realize like the endless possibilities that you will get to if you understand like the fundamentals and how to work with dates in Tableau, because they are just so flexible what you can do with just one date. In terms of agenda, I'll first introduce the concepts of date parts and date values, so the basics that you really need to know to be able to do this analysis. After that, I want to examine 2 great examples from the community so that you can actually see what kind of great stuff you can do once you understood those 2 basics. Plus, after that, we go into more advanced, or not, this is an intermediate level session, but into date functions that are a bit more versatile, and we'll do that by me giving you a live demo of these few great examples. Please remember any questions that you might have for asking them after the session, or once I invite you to step up and ask questions. We'll have a handheld microphone, so someone will be coming to you. As a prerequisite, everything I'm going to tell you will not make any sense if you don't have Tableau recognize your column that contains time-based information as a date. So you should see one of these 2 symbols next to the dimension in the data pane. So either it's the calendar or the calendar with a little clock for having respective just a date or a date plus also time information. Of course, we try to be smart and help you. So since version 10.2 Tableau applies automatic date parsing, so there's a good chance that even if you have some exotic date formats, that Tableau will recognize it for you and automatically give you this little calendar symbol next to your dimension. But if you don't have that, rest assured you can help yourself using the date parse function. So you can actually give it a Google for your date formats. These are based on ISO standards. So just find out how your time-based information is structured and provide this to the date parse formula. Otherwise, I also have a lot of clients that store their time-based information in separate columns that might come from SAP systems and other reporting tools that might be sitting in front of the data processing pipeline. So you can use make date to combine year, month, and day into a full timestamp. And then you're ready to go. So now we got this out of our way, we can examine the concepts of date parts and date values in Tableau. So let's switch to Tableau Desktop. I think the best example to explain the concept of date parts is building this simple calendar view. So this shows us the hottest selling days for the last month. It's really useful for any operational use cases, like seeing how many support tickets you got in on a particular day, or the sales, or any other things that might be relevant to track on a daily basis. So yeah, take your cameras down. We'll be building this live in front of you now. So in Tableau, I'll be using the Superstore dataset, which is the greatest dataset of all time, of course. And we'll be using just one dimension, order date, and one measure, which is sales. So let's drag out sales, and let's drag out order date. So what Tableau does automatically is give you this blue pill aggregating your time-based information to the year of this particular date dimension. The automatic drill-down capability, so this little plus sign, gives you the flexibility to expand into every part that's to your date without you needing to write any calculations. So this is so helpful for anyone getting started with Tableau. You can change the kind of date part that Tableau takes out of your timestamp by right-clicking into the context menu. So in this upper section, you actually find all the different date parts that Tableau can extract out of your date. So for building this calendar, I will change it basically to the weekday, because we're seeing Monday to Sunday on the header part of our view. And let's drag year to our filter and change it to only show us the previous month based on the current date. And in the bottom you can actually see somehow Tableau is giving us these weekdays, but the name is too long. You can change this formatting by just right-clicking onto this header and changing the way Tableau displays this particular time-based information. So I find this super useful. I actually want to change it to abbreviation, because in that way we do have a little bit more space, right? In the background, Tableau, if you double-click the pill, is actually writing this date part calculation for you. So this is just the automatic that's displayed to you, but underneath the hood you have the date part calculation that extracts the information, what's the particular weekday, from the order date. So what we're missing now is moving sales onto color and distributing our time-based information across weeks. And I do have one pro tip for you, which I didn't know until I was, I think, working at least 6 months at Tableau. To not drag and click and drag and click, you can actually right-click your mouse button, hold it while you move it to the rows shelf, and once you drop it, you get this full menu that gives you all the different options which date part you would like to use. So we're going to choose week, and ta-da, this is our calendar view. So let's make it a little bit larger. Oop. Demo. Alright, so just to make it a little bit pretty, in a few seconds we'll not show the header, and we can actually also drag the day of order date to our label. And from the formatting here, push it into the upper left corner with some space, and you have a pretty calendar which shows you the hottest sales just within a few clicks, just with one date dimension and just clicking, no calculations needed at all. So this is one of the, let's say, advanced chart types that you can create just without calculations. Really great. So covering or wrapping up the date parts, they always result from the date part function, which will give an integer. Actually, the weekdays, they would be 1 to 7, but Tableau displays and formats it for you to say Monday to Sunday. And there's this automatic drill path right at the top here from year down into the seconds, and let's call them the extra date parts, week, weekday, and day of year there. So Tableau creates these nice panes for me and distributes, and I can use these different date parts. But I might have use cases where I want to see just one continuous line to analyze how my business has been doing in a more sequential way. Not having these date parts, but actually using date values that you can see in the lower section of the context menu, this will give you these combinations of different date parts. So if we switch it to the monthly level here, we get one continuous line, which would, for example, allow us to add a trend line that will just show us how the overall business is doing historically and give an outlook if it's going good or not. So date values, and I acknowledge that this hierarchy there might be a little bit detailed. These date values, they result from the date trunc function and is effectively rounding down or rounding your timestamp to the level of accuracy that you specify in the function using the date part placeholder. So actually, let's look at week, for example. Today is the 5th of July. If we specify the week data level, Tableau will actually round this 5th of July to be the 2nd of July, which was Monday, so the start of the week. And the same concept is for quarter, for example. It's Q3 now, and this started on the 1st of July. So the 5th of July is actually rounded to this specific level of accuracy. Also in terms of behavior, these two concepts, they act a little bit differently. The date parts you saw, they create panes. So you get a header for each date part that you drag out. And your values, your sales, they can only fall, or your transactions, they can only fall into one of these buckets, right? And date values, on the other hand side, they always draw this continuous axis. So as you get more granular, these data points, they could fall anywhere along the line, though you just have an axis label, for example, every other month. So moving from this theory into practice and examine the time, what I think are two great examples for time-based dashboards that measure performance, I have a question for you. So on this view that was done by Lindsay Poulter in the US for Makeover Monday, we can see she's using bullet charts to display actual KPIs for transport in Washington, indicating with color if the target was met or not. The really great thing she's using are these spark lines. So you can see this time-based view with the little pom-pom indicator for the last data point. I have a question. Is this based using a date trunc or a date part? Anyone? Just shout. Trunc. Yes, that's correct. It's definitely a date trunc, and therefore it's a date value, because you can see there's one continuous axis which has labels for the different years, but the data points are actually displayed on a monthly level, just in between these, so it's continuous along this axis, and therefore it has to be a combination of month and year, right? So the next example looks really similar to one of our internal sales dashboards. First, because it's Salesforce data, and second, because we are also rolling on this quarterly cadence. The author of this viz has included a countdown over here which shows how many days are left until the end of the quarter to put some pressure on the salespeople looking at it, right? So this could be achieved with a date function. We're going to see examples of these later. And below there is a chart that would, like this bar chart, that would give us an overview of how our quarterly sales were doing across year and quarter. So question to you again, is this a date part or a date value? It can only be one of them. Gilles, do you know?
You mean the one on the left?
Yes, I mean this one.
It has to be a date.
A date part? We're seeing year and we're seeing quarter. So how possibly was this view built? Anyone? Using date parts or date values?
The year and the columns and the month again.
Correct. It's basically year and quarter next to each other on columns. So you cannot get a view like this that has separate panes. So this pane for 2012 and this pane for Q1 without using date parts. So you see how understanding these two concepts actually helps you to determine what kind of visualization you can do with it. So moving from the theory into examples and inspiration, what could we possibly do now that we've seen these two examples? We can take the best of these and create the greatest superstore metrics scorecard of all time. So the calendar we've already built. Who of you would say, back home, I think I can figure out how to do this? Yeah? Is that clear? The next thing we want to do is create a bar chart similar to the one that Lindsay Poehler used on her Washington Metro KPI viz. That would show us the regional sales year to date versus the previous year to date. Is everyone familiar with the concept of year to date? If not, on the bar we want to show what is the accumulated sales just from 1st of January to the 5th of July today. Comparing this to the previous year to date, so any sale that happened from the 1st of January 2017 to the 5th of July 2017 will give us some sense of growth, right? So making at least last year's number should get us in a good position to justify our ongoing business. Then we find the percentage difference and add an indicator for any region that's not doing that well. So how can we do this? Switching out of presenter mode. Once we drag our sales and our regions, we already have more or less the layout that we want. But in fact, we need to apply two conditions to this bar. The first being, it must be this year, and the second, it must be any day that's happened before today. We can achieve this using a calculation, and I'll also show you the function reference that Tableau has, where you can look up all the date functions that we'll be using. So I'll call this year to date. And the conditions we want to apply are that if, and you can see there are functions like year and date part. So you could either use date part and specify year instead of month, like in this example, or use these, I call them like fast-track date part functions. So if the year of order date, so a particular transaction, equals the year of today, this is our first condition. I'm not hard coding 2018 into there because I actually want my dashboard or my viz to adjust to any period that's coming up. So once we move into Q4 or move into 2019, this will be flexible. The second condition, so I combine this with an AND clause, must be that our order date needs to be smaller or equal to today. So this will give us effectively, what did I do? Of course, if these two conditions are true, only then we want to have our sales as a measure, and accepting this calculation, replacing sum of sales with our latest calc will give us any sale and sum it up for us that's happened year to date. The previous year to date is then actually quite similar. So we can simply duplicate this calc. I'll call it previous year to date. And here the conditions just need to be slightly different. So it needs to be last year instead of this year. How can we do this? We've already specified date part year, so what would be the easiest thing? -1, right? So now we're looking at only the past year, and the other challenge then, or the second condition, would be to have any day, or let's say we need 1st of January to 5th of July, and the days every year are the same. So there's actually the date part called day of year. I don't remember clearly, I think it's day 189 today. So the date part of order date has to be smaller or equal to the date part day of year, which is today. All right, missing a D. Don't worry, you'll also be able to download the workbook after the Tableau conference to recreate this. So this calculation will effectively give us the previous year to date. It's quite easy, right? Once you understand how to use date parts. Okay, so I want this actually on a reference line, going to the analytics pane and showing the previous year to date, some really fat reference line. Okay, now we can see that clearly something's going on in the East. They're not making their number at all, but I'd really like to know what is actually the percent difference that, that is between the current and the previous year. So here we're applying just very simple maths, and I'm cheating a little bit. So this will give us the percent difference, just a simple arithmetic calc that gives us that percentage. Okay, I will move it to detail first. And we can put it in front of our regions or behind our regions, formatting it to percentage. Let's move it there. And here we go. It's actually minus 35%. I don't think we could ever make this up. Really need to step up our game in this East region. Another trick that I want to show you, because I'm sure you've seen it in other dashboards before, is that some of these dashboards do have these nice indicators with like arrows pointing up or arrows pointing down. I found the most easy way to use them is not using shapes, but actually using your characters that you can create with the ASCII or other typesets. Having this indicator, like this little downward arrow, actually as part of the calculation. So I only want to show this if the sum of year to date is smaller or equal to, no, let's say smaller than the previous year to date sales. Only then I want to show this indicator. and this we can move right here. And what I forgot about it is that to not have any null values, we also include some empty space in this calc. Zooming in. So this, if I apply, this will get us rid of the null values in the column for the indicator. So this is a real-world example application of using date parts and also using date function that will give you just the right part of your data set that shows you the numbers that you want, right? So to achieve these kind of period comparisons, you can use any operator that Tableau offers you in calculated fields like equals to. And I recommend that you should always use today and now to specify those offsets to make it dynamic to your analysis and to allow it to change to the next upcoming period. Year, month, and day are these fast track date functions that you can use for taking the specific date part out of it. You could also use date add. It does exactly the same. So if you, example, want to increment based on a week number, then you would use date add instead of these fast track ones because it's not available simply. Increments you can use the simple arithmetic, but I warn you, please don't use like the arithmetic just on the dimension without specifying a date part, because some data sources store dates as integers, like counting the days from the 1st of 1900. So just doing maths on that you might end up with unexpected results. So please bear in mind, always specify a date part. Always tell Tableau, I want the year, I want the month. So going back to our greatest dashboard of all time, now it's the time to finally look at the last date function that we have not used, which is date diff. I want to show you two new ways to use date diff on this historical quarter comparison chart. So what's great about this is that we are actually highlighting the most relevant quarters that we want to compare, which is the current one, the previous one, and the same quarter last year. And we are using this view internally at Tableau because we can really nicely track the linearity of sales towards the end of the quarter. So we can really see if we had any really great deals along the way, the line jumping up or being really flat. That's not a good indication. And as you've seen on the other example here, you could even add a reference line that would allow you to track how far is the line of the current quarter towards the goal, right? So in this example, we can actually see with high analytical value that we should make our number in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So going a bit graphical and visual on data actually makes really great impact instead of just having a KPI with arrow up and arrow down. So think about it. All right. The quarter comparison chart, if we look at our Tableau function reference again, we are going to use the date diff function. And the most obvious use case, of course, for date diff would be to calculate the time it takes, for example, between order and shipment, to track time to process or time to deliver, time to resolve, questions like this that would require you to use 2 different date dimensions, right? I want to show you 2 new ways actually to use this date diff calculation to come up with this really creative view that shows us cumulated sales across the week of the quarter. So to find the difference in weeks between a particular transaction and the first day of the quarter, we can actually use a function that we already know. Call this first day of quarter, which is date trunc. So if we truncate our order date to the specific quarter, this will end up giving us the 1st of July, right? The second calc then is to find the difference. So this is week and quarter. This will find us the difference in weeks between this first day of the quarter and our current, or the different transactions basically. So we would know which is our week of the quarter. So now we are in, believe still week 1, right? So from the calendar we are still in week 1 of the quarter. So the difference between the start day and this particular week would be 1 or 0, but not all cases allow that. So actually incrementing plus 1 would always give us week 1, also in cases where we're actually in week 0, like the difference would be 0. So now we can use this week and quarter along our sales and add a quick table calculation, running total. But we need this for each year and each quarter. So the secret sauce to that is to add the year of order date and the quarter. This, of course, doesn't need to be a sum, but a dimension. So we don't want to add up all these differences, but display it as a continuous axis. So that's why I just changed it from a measure to a dimension. And here is our linearity in sales. So now all these lines look the same, but we've seen we want to highlight the current quarter and the previous one. So with our highlight quarters calculation, and I'm also going to cheat here, we can find out what the difference is in quarters to the current transaction. So the current quarter would be 0. There's no difference between the start of the quarter and today. And we can do the same for the previous one. So a difference of 1 between the current quarter and all transactions that were in the last quarter is 1. I hope that makes sense to everyone. And finding the same quarter last year, so 4 quarters ago, that will give us the same last year. Otherwise, we would clarify or specify all the other ones as being older. Alright, so this I want to use on color, and of course change them a little bit. Gray goes in the back, so the older ones, they are not that critical. Current one is maybe red, previous orange, and the same last year is yellow. So we are only in week 2, so the current quarter is not on track yet. But we can see that the previous quarter did a lot less sales than the same quarter last year. So that's indicating that Superstore actually has a problem, I think, this year. They're quite the same size and a little bit hard to see, the ones that we want to compare. So I'm actually going to create a set on the calculation we just did, because we want to make these lines thicker for the current and previous and same quarter last year. So this will give us these versus the older ones. And once we move this onto our size, changing the way it uses this in and out. These lines will be a little bit thicker and will stand out. So with a few clicks and these two novel scenarios of using date div, you can create a very impactful chart that would give you this sales linearity. I'll leave you some time to take a photo. So on date arithmetic here, going beyond the obvious use case of finding like the average days, for example, it takes to ship, we can also use today in these calculations to always make it dynamic or referenceable to the current present. And you can see that we can actually also nest our date functions. So you can specify a date trunk within a date div. So they are really versatile. You can nest them into each other. And the same caution, the same warning goes also for the date, finding the date difference. Don't simply subtract ship date, order date from ship date, because it will not give you the right result. So always bear in mind you need to use the date functions. You need to use and specify the correct date parts that you want to find the difference on, right? Last but not least, going back to the greatest superstore scorecard, we want to find the number of customers, actually the new customers we had this year. And you could think this is quite a tough calculation. Yes, it is a level of detail calculation, but it is built using also our date parts. So we'll see how we can do that. And it needs to be displayed as the single KPI and not visual. So that's a challenge, right? So these big numbers, they are created using measure values and measure names to lay out the view, making the font size a little bit bigger so that it catches people's attention, right? You can use a date or date functions also in level of detail calculations. For example, to find the first purchase date of a customer, because that information is not there available for us. There's no dimension telling us this customer is new or this customer is an existing one. So it's a dimension that we need to derive. And we're gonna use the scoping declaration of fixed to tell Tableau to always calculate this expression based on the customer ID. They can have multiple transactions, but Tableau is going to look at all the transactions they had and find the first one. So using the minimum of our order date in the aggregate expression of this level of detail calculation allows us to derive this new dimension that will tell us the first transaction date of this person. What we want to achieve is not done with this, though. We also need to compare again if the year of the first purchase date is also the current year. So new customers this year are essentially the ones that have the year of their first purchase equal to the year of today, right? We've already seen a very similar calc. If this is the case, then we only want to show our customer ID so that we can count it. We can also perform this count distinct right within the calculation. Just moving it apart, that you can see that we are adding an aggregation on top of this expression here. So this calc will always give you the number of customers that were net new in the current year that you specify, and it will adjust it once we move into 2019. So new customers this year, we can simply add it to the measure values shelf, and there it is. So we're being really flexible around using dates in Tableau. Not can you only use all these date functions, date part, date trunk, and date div, and everything that we've seen, but also derive new information like this first order date by inserting your date into the aggregate expression of this LOD. Or if we think about an example that I had last week with a customer, they were running an amusement park and had a very nice viz laid out with a map of the park, seeing how many visitors they had for the specific areas. But what they wanted to know was the daily average. So adding the order date or the visit date into the detail would give us like a millions of points on the map. It's not millions, but thousands of points, let's say, for all the visitors of that park. Using their visit timestamp of the wireless login, that was wireless data, people logging into the Wi-Fi in the park, including this timestamp in the dimension declaration. So this date trunk in the dimension declaration of the LOD would then allow us to calculate the average daily visitors. So not the visitors in total, but like how many there are that visit the park on average. So you can even have a date function in this dimension declaration, which is, I think, one of the latest features around time-based analysis in Tableau, because all of this stuff has actually been around since forever. So starting from version 1, basically all of these time-related functions have been in Tableau and are ready to use for you, which makes it such a great product. Okay, wrapping up on our greatest superstore metrics scorecard, we have seen how easy it is and what you can do with just one date in Tableau. We have just used order date and created so many different views. I hope that's been helpful for you, so I'm very curious what questions you have about this. Anyone? Yes?
How about going down to daily level and
Hi. How about going down to daily level and also considering that every year the day is rolling, the day of the week. So sometimes, for example, in my case in e-commerce, it's very critical a Monday versus a Sunday, but year over year, the day is rolling one day. So just how would you deal with that?
You mean, for example, finding out what the day in a week, like 1 to, no. Okay. So finding the same Monday from last year, that would probably be a combination of several of them. Maybe the day of year date part can help. But on the top of my head, I cannot tell you the exact calculation right now, but maybe we can find out after the session. Thank you. Yes, please.
Yeah. Thank you. When you're looking at the time difference between two events, and say you choose seconds as the lowest element, is there a way of auto aggregating the results, seconds into minutes, into hours, into days, that you get? Well, because obviously you just get a number that comes out of the date diff.
The date diff, it derives for example, if you say seconds, it would derive the difference in seconds based on a row level. So you actually have this information available to either find the average, so in a measure basically, but you could also use this as a dimension. For example, to create a histogram that would tell you, okay, actually my data or like the number of website visits is spread out, or like the delays are spread out according to this curve basically. So knowing about the difference between discrete and continuous and measures and dimensions will help you get to the result you want there, probably. Does
You
it?
can't roll that up into minutes automatically without the whole nested if then statement.
Oh, you mean, okay, then rolling the difference in seconds up to the minutes. You would need to divide this by the specific time increments, divided by 60, divided by the second level number.
Okay, it's no stick.
No, it's part of the calc then. Yes. Run faster, Erwin.
Thank you for that, it's really interesting. I'm just wondering whether there's an easy way of doing the sort of calculations year on year that you've done with financial years, because most of the data I work with will work from April to end of March the following year. So is there an easy way of comparing this year to last year without having to be creative with when the year starts? So is all our financial year calculations, or do you have to compare it to 1st of April that year? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, do you know about that you can specify the start of your fiscal year in Tableau as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, we should probably examine this question offline too. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
You see, you can do lots of stuff, but it's not always that easy to like tell on the top of your head what is the right calculation. Sometimes I also find myself standing in front of a calendar, figuring out that I need this month and compared to this week, and then finding the conditions that would specify the right part of my data table, right? So it's always making sense of, okay, what am I gonna look at based on this calendar view? What do I need? Which month compared to which month? And then figuring out the correct parameters for that. So it's very flexible, but you need to do some thinking first. All right, with this, wait, I need to, what's the time? Okay. With this, I want to make you aware of the other sessions that might be very useful for you to visit. So the next one coming up in the afternoon is the crazy Bethany Lyons that's going to talk about how Tableau helped her solve a personal life crisis, which I think is not the most appropriate title for it, because she's actually explaining how you can solve data structure challenges around time and dates. For example, how many active employees did I have on a particular point in time? So these kinds of challenges Bethany will explain to you. So this is Jedi level. And a very good session to review the recording is also Andy Green's new ways to visualize time that can give you a little bit more inspiration also on how to visualize and what kinds of different charts you can create for time-based analysis other than the obvious line chart. And I want to thank you very much for coming to this session. I hope it's been helpful. I hope you understand date parts a little bit better and how to do your time-based analysis in Tableau. And yeah, I would like to invite you to fill out the session survey. So for me, to know about how I could improve this content, how I could improve this presentation style. Your feedback is highly appreciated. And yeah, enjoy your lunch break. Have a great day.